grab your cup, take a seat, and get ready. Because what you're about to see isn't your average committee discussion. This is the political version of someone trying to explain how an oven works while the smoke alarm is screaming and the dinner is already burning to a crisp. But before we jump into the chaos, quick favor. If you're enjoying videos like this, hit that like button and smash subscribe. Crazy fact. Over 98% of viewers watch without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it helps the channel massively. Go on, tap it. Done? Perfect. You're a legend. All right, let's roll the footage.
Some 45% of households now face a shortfall between the local housing allowance they receive and the rent they pay. Some local authorities top this up, and that's costing them in aggregate £204 million. But when we did a study, the PAC did a study on this way back in January, your officials at DWP could not tell us what effect the freezing of these local housing allowances would have on increased homelessness, because there must be an effect.
Well, I hope that since then they've provided you with a letter or some further evidence. If they haven't, I shall make sure I do after this session. But in relation to homelessness, that is also an initiative led by the Deputy Prime Minister. It's one of the priorities that I've given her, and we have put a lot of money, so £950 million, into more temporary accommodation. That's money straight into local authorities, because often it's a lack of temporary accommodation that is one of the causes of the problem. And overall, we're investing £1 billion in reducing homelessness, and that involves a lot of preventative work. So there is a central focus on homelessness, quite a lot of money being put behind it, but particularly focused on this question of temporary accommodation available to local authorities.
So if I could just stick with homelessness a minute, we discovered that the cladding remediation levy was sucking up so much of developers' funds that the affordable housing starts in London last year, from a fairly low base, I accept, dropped by 90%. Yeah. That surely is not going to help either the people who are made homeless or your overall effort to reduce poverty, is it?
No, and we need to drive that up, and that's a problem we've identified and are working on. Obviously, we've got to do the necessary work on cladding. That's got to be financed, but you're absolutely right that we need to turn that number around and drive it up. And so the Deputy Prime Minister is across all these issues of housing.
So one of the hardest things I found in our inquiry was that at June 24, almost 6,000 households with children were being housed in bed and breakfasts, of which almost 4,000 were over the 6-week limit. I just ask you, Prime Minister, to imagine what it's like living in B&B with children, especially over when you're having to get out probably at 9 o'clock in the morning and not come back till 6 o'clock in the evening. It must be pretty hard. And of that, so we found that 39,000 households were living in occupying temporary accommodation outside their normal home area. So there will be people living over the 6-week limit with B&Bs, with children, outside their area, trying to struggle to get to schools or work or whatever it is they have to do. I really wonder what would you suggest you can do to begin to solve that problem?
Well, firstly, let me acknowledge it's a real problem, has a huge impact on families, and not just the physical aspects of living in those conditions and the cramped and small circumstances, but also in very many cases the ability of a child, for example, to get on with their homework and get on at school. So it has not just immediate short-term consequences, it has longer-term consequences, because those same children, once they're struggling at school, will then struggle further down the line in school. That is why it's important that we have put the extra money into temporary accommodation for local authorities to make sure there's a wider range of accommodation. Now, you can't fix this overnight, but you're absolutely right, it needs to be turned around for all the reasons that you've identified, and I absolutely understand.
Thank you
very much.
Florence
Thank you,
Just on that, Prime Minister, every homeless child means a child missing school, a child missing out on a vital and welcome breakfast club that your government have committed to, a child or adult missing out on those extra hospital appointments because they don't have a safe and secure home to go to. We are seeing councils at breaking point because of the additional money spent on temporary accommodations. A number of councils declaring bankrupt because of temporary accommodation. This is not sustainable. And I come back to some of the measures that have been taken by the government. So just to ask, do you feel, Prime Minister, then that we do need to have an urgent reset in local government funding to look at these long-term solutions and key pressures facing councils up and down the country?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, let me say we have put £1 billion into homelessness. That is a huge amount, more than any government's put in for a very, very long time, for precisely the reasons that have been identified by this committee. So there's an absolute commitment on homelessness, and the money was put there in the budget and the spending review to make good on the commitment on homelessness. On the wider question of local authority funding, yes, I do think it needs a review. I've long thought it needs a review, amongst other things. We need multi-year settlements. There are no end of local authorities that say to me, because it's a year-on-year allocation of money, we can't use the money as effectively as we might otherwise be able to do. There are, I don't know how many local authorities who say to me, until you fix, as we are now doing, the no-fault eviction problem, you'll have a homelessness problem, and the bill will be picked up by local authorities. That's why we brought in the provisions to get rid of no-fault evictions. So I absolutely agree with you. This needs review, it needs change. We've started the process of change, and they would be, as it were, the top contenders that, for me, of what we're getting on with to bring about a material change as quickly as we can.
Okay, that's good. So it'll be good to know when we'll expect to see some of those changes and the extra investment, and if it's something that...
Well, the investment in homelessness has gone in already. I mean, the money's been made available.
When do you expect to see a change?
Well, as soon as possible. I've got the Deputy Prime Minister project managing this. We're looking across the numbers. We're getting the money to where it needs to be. But the financial commitment and the political commitment are in place, and the Deputy Prime Minister is pretty focused. I mean, it matters hugely to her. It matters hugely to me. And therefore we're driving it through central government.
I talked earlier about your vision in 3 years. I mean, you're saying in 3 years, in the next year, you'll see a difference. When do you think we'll see the actual difference on the ground? Because
in homelessness or living standards more generally?
Well, on this particular issue, on housing and temporary accommodation.
Oh, the money going into temporary accommodation, I want to see having immediate effect. In other words, more accommodation available. Now, obviously, it'll take some time to get it into place. But
where is this accommodation going to come from?
This isn't a delayed project. Well, in terms of what can be built, what can be arranged, what can be taken by councils and repurposed is a central focus of what we're doing. But I'm impatient for this change to be driven through. There's no desire on government for this to take any longer than it needs to take to be done effectively and properly.
It's just that we've got Home Office bidding for homes for asylum seekers. We've got councils bidding for the same properties.
Everyone's
driving up the price, driving up the cost.
I know, which is why I'm so furious at the last government for leaving tens of thousands of asylum seekers unprocessed with nowhere to live other than accommodation paid for by the taxpayer.
Are you planning to build homes or put people into...
We have to do a number of things. We do have to build, of course.
But that won't happen in the next year.
We have to take over other accommodation, and we have to drive down the asylum lists. There is
just a pinpoint before. What other accommodation precisely are you planning to take over to provide temporary accommodation for families?
Oh, there's lots of housing in many local authorities that can be used, and we're identifying where it can be used. But I mean, look.
Can you give us? Have you got any examples you can give us?
No, but I'll write in and give you details.
Because I could say certainly in a number of our local authorities, already picking up from around the table, there isn't a lot of spare housing available. If there were, councils would be able to be dealing with it by now.
Well, exactly, which is why leaving a huge tens of thousands of unprocessed asylum seekers that need to be housed is a huge problem for this government.
You'll be putting homeless families into those hotels?
No. We're looking at what accommodation is available, and I'll make sure that we send a detailed letter.
Okay, well, we certainly look forward to receiving that detailed note. Councils will be breathless waiting.
It all began when Sir Geoffrey Clifton Brown launched the opening question of doom. The kind of question so tight, so unforgiving, it leaves no trapdoor, no escape tunnel, not even a polite diplomatic slide out. 45% of households facing a gap between housing allowance and rent. Councils burning through hundreds of millions just to plug it. Homelessness rising because allowances stayed frozen. A simple, direct, evidence-heavy question. And then came Starmer's answer. So silky, so artistically evasive, it deserves to be framed in a gallery of political sidestepping. He blinked, shuffled, and with the confidence of a man hoping the room had already forgotten the question entirely, said, well, I hope they've sent you a letter. A letter. as if the cure for homelessness is postal stationery. You could practically feel the entire committee thinking, "Prime Minister, we weren't discussing the Royal Mail." But he kept going, drifting into temporary accommodation, more funding, £1 billion. All technically true, but spectacularly unrelated to the actual point. It was like answering, "What time is it?" with, "I once owned a watch. Thanks for nothing." Sir Geoffrey, unfazed, sharpened the next question like a man fully prepared to unplug the waffle machine. Affordable housing in London had fallen 90%. 90%. A number so catastrophically absurd, it sounds like a printer misfire. Surely this would force a clear explanation. But no, this is Starmer, a man who could be asked, "Is water wet?" and would reply, "Well, the Deputy Prime Minister has been reviewing moisture." He nodded solemnly, acknowledged the disaster, and delivered, "We need to drive that up." A sentence that explains absolutely nothing about how or when anything will drive anywhere. It was like someone agreeing the Titanic sinking was unfortunate and responding by recommending more floatiness. Yet Sir Geoffrey pushed on, because committee MPs are built from tougher material. He raised the issue of thousands of families stuck in B&Bs, kids trapped for weeks. Many pushed miles away from home, a tragic problem, a practical question. What can be done? Starmer, to be fair, acknowledged the human side quite sincerely, but then came the pivot. The practice slide into broad themes: struggling children, early intervention, long-term cycles, more temporary accommodation. All comforting shapes of words, none of them answering the pressing question. If he were a magician, this was the moment the smoke machine would hide the missing rabbit. Then Florence Eshalomi stepped in, with the energy of someone absolutely refusing to let him glide into fog. Homeless kids missing school, councils financially collapsing, bankruptcies looming. Then the sharp, unavoidable question. Do we need an urgent reset of council funding? A clean yes-no grenade. Starmer carefully picked up the grenade, admired its shine, and set it gently back on the shelf. He praised the billion-pound promise. He acknowledged the problem, then floated off into multi-year settlements, private renting rules, and everything except a direct answer. Eventually, he admitted the funding system needed looking at, but with the energy of someone promising to sort the attic after finishing a cup of tea. Florence pushed again. When would real change happen? When do these grand words turn into actual reality? Starmer suddenly shifted to speed mode, insisting the money had already gone in, saying they were pushing hard, describing the deputy PM working like someone building IKEA furniture without the manual. But still, no timeline, no outline, no specifics, just pure, concentrated government vibes. Then Meg Hillier entered, with the tone of a referee who was fully done with the dodging. She skipped the warm-up entirely. When will we see real differences on the ground? Not in plans or speeches, but where families are stuck right now. Starmer nodded with intense enthusiasm, as if the nodding itself might transform into an answer. He wanted immediate effect. He wanted more accommodation. He was impatient for change. All inspiring, but still not the answer Meg was looking for. So she asked again, where exactly will this accommodation come from? And this is where the whole thing reached peak parody, political theater in its purest form. First, councils might build some. Then it won't happen within a year. Then maybe buildings get repurposed. Then asylum backlog. Then blame the last government. Then the classic, we have to do a number of things. Which is politician language for, I don't know what the things are yet. Meg spotted the rare opening to extract one solid detail. What specific accommodation are you planning to take over? Surely. At least one real example this time. Nope. Starmer delivered the iconic line, "No, but I'll write in and give you details." You could almost hear the oxygen leave the room. A masterclass. The tactical promise of a future letter. Half the committee visually aged as they realized no detail was coming today. Somewhere, a civil servant opened a blank Word document titled, Letter to Committee, Fill in later. Meg tried again, pointing out the obvious. Councils don't have spare homes lying around like forgotten socks. If they did, they'd already be using them. She might as well have held up a neon sign flashing, "Answer the question." But Starmer held firm, pulling off his signature style. Strategic non-specificity. He drifted back to asylum numbers, then hotels, then looking at accommodation, then another promise of a letter. By this point, viewers at home were checking their mailboxes. The brilliance of the whole exchange wasn't in what he said. but what he managed to never say for a full 15 minutes. Every time an MP crafted a sharp, precise question, he sidestepped it with the elegance of someone avoiding puddles in brand new shoes. Not hostile, just gently lost, like someone asked for their favorite biscuit and responding with a 5-minute explanation of train timetables. Meanwhile, the MPs sharpened, pressed, refused to accept poetic policy clouds as answers. Sir Geoffrey, Florence, Meg, all determined, all ending up empty-handed except for the eternal promise of a letter. But beneath the comedy, there's something real. These MPs were trying to pin down policies that shape actual lives, homes, and communities. And watching them navigate a maze of half-answers felt like asking for directions from someone who can only describe the philosophical meaning of roads. By the time Meg dropped her final line, councils will be breathless waiting for it. The room felt like the end of a play where everyone applauds the effort despite the absurdity. And Starmer, calm, nodding, prepared to write more letters than a Victorian romance author. That's the charm of the whole appearance. Not villainy or chaos, just a prime minister so determined to avoid specifics he could talk through an entire journey without revealing his destination. MPs refusing to accept waffle as payment. And viewers witnessing real politics outperform scripted satire. So as we end this ride of polite interrogation and graceful dodging, buckle up, because the footage ahead captures every elegant sidestep, every "I'll write to you," every answer that waves politely at the question before floating away like a lost balloon. And remember, it's just parody. See you in the next one.